All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this month's Discover Tennessee History webinar. We're really excited to have you join us for our session today. So a couple of things as we get started. One, we are recording this for our YouTube list. So if you would just kind of keep your mics muted. We do want the session to be interactive for those of us who are able to join live. So be sure to open up the chat box and introduce yourself there, and feel free to make comments throughout. I think Chris is going to give us some additional instructions for how to today's session is going to be interactive as we go forward. So also we have a Padlet page. So if this is your first time to view one of these, know that you can go back and actually see all of the sessions from this Discover Tennessee History series, both for this school year as well as for the previous school year. We'll have the links for the videos as well as the different resources that are mentioned today. Today's session is presented by the Tennessee State Museum, and Christopher Grisham is going to be our presenter today, talking about Tennessee's first peoples. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to him.
All right, guys. Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining in. I see we got McNairy and Sumner County there. Excellent. Basically, like Kara said, I'm going to be talking to us a little bit about Tennessee's prehistoric peoples, and we're going to look at the 4 different time periods or eras that we kind of divide them into, going all the way back to the very first people that came into the Tennessee area, the Paleo. We'll move through the Archaic, the Woodland, and the Mississippian, and we'll do a little compare and contrast with those different cultures. And this does hit some of the standards, both with 3rd grade, talking about prehistoric cultures, and there's clearly one 5th grade standard, if any of you are 5th grade teachers, that specifically talk about these 4 and in Tennessee in the Tennessee history course. So hopefully this will be helpful with that. But I'm going to present it to you guys pretty much in a similar way that I would with the students, and the way that I try to connect it, these really distant cultures, from our time period, but connect it to the students and their lives today. So we're going to focus in on a couple of things, but the big thing with prehistoric people is the way that we know about their culture. And this is something that we talk about with the students, is through objects, through artifacts that have been left behind. The definition of prehistoric, prior to writing. So this is a time period where we don't have people's diaries or letters to each other or newspapers or journals or legal documents where we can go through and find out what life was like in the daily basis for the people that lived here. We have to discover this through archaeology and through artifacts that have been left behind. So it really does kind of create a different atmosphere of the history that we're going to talk about, and a different way of studying it. When you look at these objects, you really have to analyze them in a different way than you do when you're reading a text and things like that. So that's really what we try to introduce our students to, that first of all, we're going to talk about the cultures and learn more about them, but also learn about how we learn about history in different ways. So I am going to show you guys, we're going to start with our oldest group, the Paleo people that are into this area. And we're talking about, 10,000 years ago plus, as Paleo people are moving in. But before we really dive into them, I do want to show you guys this. I am up here in the museum and I am on an iPad, so bear with me on that. As far as communicating, you guys can type in the chat. I do have that up and I'll be able to see it. But basically what I'm going to do is kind of move us through the exhibit, and I'm going to show you guys some of the, not only exhibits, but the artifacts, and we're going to use the camera to do that. So I'm going to try and give you the best look possible. I'm also, as we move, going to try to do it slowly and not really get any motion sickness for you guys as I start to move the camera around. But one of the first cases that you're going to come to if you visit the museum and the students will see is going to be this one right here, that really shows tools from the Paleo period that have been found and that are part of our collection. So what I want you guys to do, I'm going to show you these, and I want you guys to put it in the chat just some things you notice. What are some things that jump out to you just visually? The first things, like I said, this is going to be the first thing that you see. So what are your takeaways? What are you going to notice as you walk into this exhibit? What are the kids going to notice and the students going to notice when they come in? What do you guys think the kids pull out of this? Many of them are shaped into a point. Absolutely. So a lot of them are shaped into a point. So what does that tell us about these tools? What could they have possibly been used for? There's differences and similarities in the shape. Hunting, absolutely. That is a primary function of most of the tools that you saw over there. They are going to be primarily hunting tools, and they're called projectile points. You have a lot of kids that will refer to them as arrowheads, but they are projectile points by archaeologist standards. But yeah, those are going to be bigger. They're not going to go on arrows. So hunting and protection, those are going to go on spears. The differences and the similarities in shape. There are some differences, right? There are some minor differences from shape to shape, size, and things like that. But overall, the ultimate shape is fairly similar across the board. So as we look at those, if we collect these up and look at them all together like this, those similarities tell us that, honestly, that's probably the best design. That is something that groups of people kind of came to design-wise, either because it was the best as far as making them or the best for use. So you see those similarities. And then you have minor variations throughout. Different types of stone. Yeah, there's going to be some different types of stone in there, but all of them are stone. And that's something that the kids tend to kind of take for granted, that they're all actual stone tools here. But why would they all be stone? Even if they are different types, and you're right, they are. And I am going to go ahead and apologize in advance. I don't know all the different types of stone. Geology was not my strong suit. Stone, that's what's available. Absolutely. This is a time period where we're not going to have all the different materials available that we have today. They're not going to be made out of plastic, for sure. They're also not going to be made out of metal. Metal was not readily available or easy to deal with here in Tennessee. So stone tools are going to be sturdy and plentiful material. So they're going to learn to make those out of stone. So that's kind of what we're going to do as we move around. We're going to look at different tools, different artifacts that are going to be at use during different time periods. And we'll kind of compare those. So let's talk about the people a little bit. Paleo group. Now with students, the way that I really like to tie this in and really compare these groups as we move around and tie it into our lives today is I want to focus on two parts of their daily life as we go from group to group and period to period. I want to focus on food. How did they survive? What did they eat? And technology. Now, first thing I do is usually ask the kids, like, hey, first of all, we need to come up with a couple of good definitions that we can all agree on. One is we are going to be comparing for cultures. So we need a definition of culture. So my teachers, you guys go ahead and put in there what you guys think a culture is. What's a good definition we could use with our students to describe culture? And we're going to focus on that. And with the kids, I'll work with them to kind of create a good functioning definition. I'm sure you guys have probably covered it in your classes. I'm curious to hear how you guys define culture for your students. A group of people with similar beliefs, shared language, belief structure, religion, aspects of life that connect a group of people. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, that's all definitely a good way to kind of talk about culture. And with students, I tend to get a lot of examples. So they'll talk about music, art, religious beliefs, traditions, food that they eat, language that you speak, the area that you live in, your history is all part of our culture. Dress, clothing, absolutely. And I will go ahead and say, students, do notice the picture up here and the different style of dress from what we may be used to today. Usually I just let them snicker until they wear themselves out I don't make a big deal out of it, but occasionally I do address it. But dress style is definitely going to be a part of our culture. So kind of the way we live our lives, the things that make up our day-to-day lives. And, we all have slight variations in that, and we have some similarities similar to our projectile points over there. Your culture may be a little bit different than your neighbor, but you're going to have a lot of similarities just from the fact that you're kind of in the same place. Maybe you're around the same age, things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about. So we need a definition of culture. Now, food is going to be one of the big aspects of culture that we're going to focus on as we go through. And like I said, technology is going to be another one. That's another definition that the kids really need. So I always ask them, what is technology? Now, again, the kids will usually give me a definition. I'll let you guys put in the chat what you want to define technology as. The kids, though, they usually give examples: iPads, video games, TVs, lights, phones, tablets of different kinds. Usually they'll say every brand of tablet you can possibly have. But my teachers, what do you tell your students? If you're talking about technology, what is that? You guys didn't know I was going to have you typing this much. Tools and skills that people use to meet their needs and wants. That's a good one. Tools you need to perform basic functions of life. Excellent. Yeah. I do refer to them as tools. Technology is really anything that makes a job easier. That's kind of the way I relate it to students. I want to put it down on their level. A tool and technology is really anything that makes a job easier. First of all, I ask my students, do our paleo culture here, do they have technology? And almost always they're going to say no. And then I have to remind them, okay, well, if technology is just anything that makes a job easier, that doesn't require electricity, right? What is making their job easier? First of all, the job is hunting. They are hunting this mastodon. We are talking about a time period where these large animals exist, and we know that from our artifacts. We have found mastodon fossils like this jawbone here in Tennessee. This is from the Coates Hines site. And that tells us that these animals existed. And we found these fossils with tools made by these people. So they coexisted. But the job is hunting. What's the tool that makes it easier? You guys are already looking at it. Yeah, they had to sharpen those stones somehow. First of all, the tool that they're using is the spear itself. So they have technology that does exist. And yes, by looking at that spear, I can tell they've got other kinds of technology. They sharpened that stone somehow. They shaped the wood that is being used for the spear shafts there. And they also had to be able to connect those in some way. So they're making string. So they've got technology, which is, like I said, first thing that kind of blows the kids' minds because they're automatically thinking electronics. But yeah, if you're going up against something the size of a mastodon, and you can see how this compares to me, basically my fist is about the size of one of these teeth here. That's not something you want to do without barehanded with no tools. You don't want to go up and try to punch a mastodon in the face. It's not going to work very well for you. So we're going to make those tools. We're going to invent technology that helps us with this job. So we're going to have those spears. Now, the other thing I'll say, so we're talking about technology. We've kind of addressed that. So let's talk about food. They are hunting the mastodon for food, for meat. And these paleo people are primarily going to eat meat. That is going to be the bulk of their diet. Most of their food is going to come through hunting. So if they're relying on these animals that are coming in, that's going to really define their culture in a lot of ways. Because the animals, especially things like mastodon, are not stationary. These animals move. They're going to migrate from place to place. So the people are going to follow them. If they rely that heavily on animals, they will follow the animals. As the seasons change, they're going to follow in and out. So our paleo people are not people who settle in Tennessee. They are nomadic. They're going to continuously be on the move. That right there is really going to define a lot of the way they live. Their tribal groups are going to be fairly small. You don't want to have a gigantic group if you have to move around, just like, you know, you go to a school. You don't have one 7th grade class of all the students. You break them up into classes individually. Each one has their own teacher. They're also not going to have a ton of stuff. If you guys had to move every couple of days or every couple of weeks even, it's not going to take you very long to start getting rid of stuff. You're not going to keep things just because you like having it. You're going to keep the things that are the most useful or the things that are necessary. So you're not going to have a lot of stuff. You're not going to have a lot of people, and you are not going to build a lot of elaborate structures. You're not going to build big, nice, fancy houses if you're not staying in it. So you're going to constantly move around. So we can tell a lot about their culture from basically where they get their food, how they move around, the tools they left behind. and we can kind of put together and build a picture of what their culture is going to look like. Now, the Paleo period does end. This is during the Ice Age, and even though the ice does not come down and cover Tennessee, what it does is it comes down and it does push a lot of these animals into Tennessee. So Tennessee does have a large diversity of animals during the Ice Age period, and the Paleo people are going to build their culture kind of around having those resources. But the Ice Age is going to end. I know they keep making Ice Age movies that apparently will never end, but eventually the actual Ice Age does. And if you have watched the movies and gotten very attached to those characters, unfortunately the story is going to be the same for most of them. They are going to go extinct. So these big animals are going to go extinct. And that's kind of the break that us today that we're going to use to define the next period, the break in the next period, and move into the Archaic period. So as we move into the Archaic period, the big animals are kind of dying off. So mastodon, no more, giant ground sloths, gone, things like that. So our people are going to have to make some pretty big adjustments. Now, there are still animals, they are still going to hunt, but what are our biggest, what are kind of our biggest animals that are going to be in Tennessee after the Ice Age? I'll let you guys put that in the chat. What do you guys think the big animals that are the main hunting animals are going to be? Let's see. And while you guys are putting that in the chat, I'm going to show you, this is kind of an artist representation of an Archaic period group. Deer, absolutely. Bear, yes. Elk, for sure. Have no idea. Yeah, deer, elk, bear, and bison. We actually have bison in Tennessee as well, more so out in West Tennessee. Small game. Now there is going to be small game, rabbits, foxes, those kind of things. Those style of animals are still going to be around, absolutely. But we were hunting with spears. You guys saw in the image in our Paleo period, those are great for those big animals. A spear is a lot harder to use in case of small game. So if we're talking like rabbits and squirrels, spears are going to be very difficult. So they're going to aim for the bigger animals more of the time. That's going to give you a lot of the meat. So the deer, the elk, the bear, and the bison are going to be your big game animals. We'll talk about the smaller game as well. But the thing is, you're going to hunt a deer a little bit differently than you would hunt a mastodon. You guys may have seen from the image there, they were surrounding the mastodon, a group of natives, and they're going to come up and stab it, basically. That's or throw the spear to distract it. But you're going to be very close quarters. But you can't really do that with some of these other animals. For one, bear and bison are both really dangerous to hunt up close. They're very aggressive. They would be happy to kill you if they feel threatened. So ideally, you're going to have to be very cautious there. So deer and elk are actually going to be the primary food source as far as meat goes, because if you accidentally stumble across a deer, it's going to run away. But elk are aggressive. From what I've never hunted elk and gotten super close to them, but from what I can tell, they can be pretty aggressive animals as well. But deer especially are also prey animals, so their first reaction is going to be to run and then get aggressive if that's the only other option. But so deer are going to become very common animal to hunt because it's a little bit safer, but they will hunt all of those. But the thing is, you do have to back up from a deer. If you get too close, you're going to scare it. It's going to take off running. Let's just use it as an example. I like to use it for the kids because some of them hunt deer. We get kids that are very familiar with hunting. You can't get super close. So you're going to have to throw your spear, which is a change. That is something different than what we did as from the Paleo period. We're going to have to throw our spear over great distances. And I'm actually going to show you guys. All right, these are archaic projectile points. So these are going to be a little bit different. You guys saw the Paleo projectile points. What's one of the big differences you see here in the archaic period? Now I'll say this one is a projectile. Let me get my finger. This one's a projectile point. This one is actually a drill, and that's a bone needle right there. So just looking at our projectile point, what's one of the big differences we see there? Yeah, this one is way smaller, right? Well, if you have a big giant rock on the end of your spear shaft, if you go to throw that, that's gonna just drop to the ground pretty quickly. It also is sharper. You're right. Now some of that could be time and wear, but it is going to be sharper. So not only are they going to have smaller projectile points so that they can actually throw them, but they're going to develop new technology to help them with this. This is where they're going to come up with, and this is my favorite word in the whole museum, an atlatl. If you look at the top row right back here, those are all things that have been found with atlatls. Now, an atlatl is just a spear thrower. So you take basically a piece of wood, a stick, about the length of your arm and your forearm. You attach a bone hook to the end, which is what that is in the middle. A lot of times these stones were found kind of in the middle of them. We're not exactly sure. Archaeologists actually still don't know what these stones function were. They're not they're not actually necessary. People have remade atlatls and they're not actually necessary for the functioning. So we're not entirely sure what those are. Archaeologists have different theories, but you do have to have this hook. And so, oh, love the atlatl too. Excellent. Yeah, it's my favorite word in the entire museum. I love that. But what you're going to do is you're going to hold that stick. It'll come out behind you. The hook's back here. You put the back of the spear in the hook, hold it, and then you throw it. And what that's going to do is it's like giving yourself a longer, stronger arm. You're going to be able to throw that spear with a lot more force than you can barehanded. So for animals you have to be farther away from, you're still going to get enough force to kill the animal at a distance where you can sneak up on it without scaring it. So this is going to change. Our culture has changed. Our food, we're still eating meat, but the prey that we're hunting has changed. So we're going to develop new technology, just like humans always do, develop new tools to help make this situation easier, our jobs easier. So we're going to develop the atlatl. That's going to help. That's also going to help with the smaller game, things that are a little faster. Atlatl is going to help with that. You saw someone demonstrate something similar this summer. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The thing that you throw a ball to a dog, if any of you have had those, that is an atlatl. That is the same technology, the same physics as they were using in the Archaic period. Also, for it has one you can try. And if you get on YouTube, you can find videos. People still hunt this way. There's people hunt in every possible way that there is imaginable. But they actually have like tournaments with atlatl throwing and things like that. And some people have gotten very good at it. Russell Cave, yep. But the other thing I point out with the kids is we're hunting different animals, but they're not going to bring in nearly as much meat as what we would have had with a mastodon. So we are going to need another source of food, and we're going to need some new tools to help us with that. So besides meat, what is another source of food? What's something else we could eat? And I'll let you guys put into the chat. Fish, that is the number one thing that kids say first, I will say. And I'm actually going to slide over here since you said fish. And yeah, they're going to eat fish, and they're going to do it the same way that we do, basically. If you take a look here, I don't know how well you can see it in, right there is actually a fish hook made out of a deer bone. You would attach that to a line just like we would today. Here's a little piece of netting that you could use for fishing. And then there's a weight stone that you might attach to a larger net when you throw it into the water. So yeah, they're going to fish. Again, new tools. Mushrooms, yeah, absolutely. What else in Tennessee, what else could we eat that's not animals, fish, mushrooms, plants, all kinds of plants, berries, fruits, there's roots, there's leaves, all kinds of stuff, but it's going to be plants. The Archaic period, these are what we really refer to as hunters and gatherers. They are also going to go out and gather for their diet, but they're going to stay nomadic like our Paleo people did. They're actually going to stay kind of able to pick up and move as they need to. So we've got some tools here for hunting, for gathering that are going to help us out with some of these plants. This one right here is a mortar and pestle. Collect up corn or anything else that you might need to grind. Put that on the large flat stone, and you can grind it up with the other stone there. So you can create a meal or a powder, basically. We're also going to start seeing early pottery as well, because you're going to have to store some stuff, right? Basket weaving is going to become much more common during the Archaic period, because if you go out into the woods, you don't want to come back with just a handful of berries. You want something you can carry on a man. So basket weaving is even going to become much more common. And I don't know how well you guys can see that, but that big rock in the back, right there, I'm going to let you guys guess what that is. What do you guys think that one might be? And I'll try to get as close as I can. It's a little easier with the kids when they're standing in front of it. While you're guessing on that, I will answer that question. Did they have horses or other types of animals for transportation? No, they really didn't. There's not really an animal in North America at this time period that you could ride. They're either things like deer and elk, which are not going to let you ride them, or also they're a little weak, to be honest. Or in South America, they would have llamas. That's really about the only domesticatable animal that we've really got around this time period. And they also are terrible at being able to hold a lot of weight. So it's not something you could ride there either. There's not a lot of animals you can domesticate. At this point, we are going to start seeing kind of the early stages of domesticating dogs, but that's, again, not something you can ride. The rock could be for grinding spices, grinding food. It's actually a little bit different. This one is for grinding, the mortar and pestle. This one up here, the big one, that is a nutcracker. Basically, you get a big rock, you wear several divots in on the inside of it, and I'll show you what it would look like in use in this image here. You wear the little divots inside of it here, and you can put the nut in there like a walnut, anything, and you just smash it with another rock. And that's going to crack that thing open. So this thing is about 8,000 years old, and it still works. I could still open nuts with that right now. They don't let me because it's behind glass, but you could do it. So yeah, they're going to be developing new tools and new technology to really help change as their diet and their culture changes. They're making these adaptations, and they're creating new technology. And like I said, some of this is stuff that we are basically still using today. Mortar and pestle still exists, not exactly like this, not made of stone for most of us. Atlatls, you know, we're using them to throw balls to dogs, but it still exists. It's still out there. So we're still using some of this. And also you can kind of see in the background of this image, they are starting to build structures as well. So these are very basic houses. They're made of basic frames with straw over the top of them and thatch. If this was the Three Little Pigs, that's basically that first house. It's not super sturdy, and it's not meant to be. It's not meant to last. You're supposed to be able to just leave it and move on. So they have adapted a lot of their culture and created, and again, I like to use food as kind of the through line through this for students because it really connects to them on their daily life. Did they travel with the seasons? Honestly, they traveled with the food. So yeah, it's going to end up being kind of seasonal from what I can tell, from what I found, kind of like birds. When we say birds migrate, fly south for the winter, they're not flying south for the winter. They're flying south because their food source is dried up and they have to go somewhere where more food is. And that just happens to coincide with the winter because the bugs and things they eat disappear during the winter. So it's going to be kind of a similar thing. They're going to move seasonally, but it's they're moving more for the food source than they are because it happened to get cold. Hopefully that answered the question. All right, but we've got another big change coming. Now, the first one was the end of the Ice Age. That was something that really could not be controlled as we move into the Archaic period. There's going to be a new development that people create, basically. People develop this new technique that is really going to cause us to move into the next period that we have defined as the Woodland period. Do you guys know what that next big change is? What is going to be a big defining difference between Archaic and Woodland people? Let's see. I'll see if I can give a hint with our image here. In the background there, you can kind of see what's going on. Yep, absolutely. Agriculture. So basically, instead of gathering, we're going to plant things. We're going to actually plant crops. We are going to harvest and grow them, which also means you're absolutely right. The one that said stay in one spot. If you're going to plant crops, you have to take care of them. You have to harvest them. These woodland Native Americans are going to be our first settlers. These are the first settlers in Tennessee, the ones that actually create settlements because they are going to be in one place. They are no longer nomadic. They're not necessarily following the animals around. You may have hunters that go out with the animals, but the whole society is not just picking up and leaving with you. And because of that, they are going to develop a lot of new tools as well. We've got a few in here that are basically farming tools. You're going to see things that are used to break up the ground, basically hoes, basically, things like that. You're also going to see a lot more pottery during this period because as you're harvesting, you're going to want to make sure that you have somewhere to store the food that you have. This is going to be also a time where we start to see different hunting tools coming along, or coming in much more common. We've got some projectile points there. These are much smaller. Why do you think our projectile points are getting even smaller than they were for the Archaic period? Small game. That's a big part of it. So we're going to hunt smaller, faster animals. Since we're no longer following the animals around, we're going to have to hunt what's near us. So we're going to see smaller, faster animals on the menu much more often than they were before. And for hunting small game, I could use an atlatl and a spear, but there is a tool that is going to be even easier to use if I'm hunting birds, if I'm hunting foxes, if I'm hunting rabbits, even squirrels. What tool might be better than an atlatl and a spear? Slingshot could work. Bows, that's right. That's going to start in the woodland period, but bow and arrows are going to become much more common during, I'm sorry, it's going to start in the Archaic period, but they're going to become much more common in the woodland period. So bows and arrows are going to become a prominent hunting tool, or the dominant hunting tool. Blow darts are also going to come along as well. Now, I do want to kind of take a break from our narrative here just to show off some cool artifacts that the museum has, because I am here and, you know, that's what we do. We show off artifacts. These are some very rare artifacts from the woodland period. So these are from about 375 CE. So we're looking at 1700 years ago. That is a woven plant fiber moccasin. Here's a piece of woven basket, and we have an arrow, a feather from an arrow right up here as well. So these are incredibly rare to have because they're made of natural materials. Most everything we've been looking at has been made of bone or stone. That's what lasts this long. But here we have things made out of plant fibers or natural materials that have happened to survive. Now, for these, for most of these, here's how they survived. These were actually found by a couple of brothers who were like to explore the caves here in Tennessee. We've got tons of them. And they happened to be exploring in one cave, and they got far enough back that they found these, and they brought them out. Basically, the cave just happened to be perfect. It was probably a trash pile, to be honest, but the cave just happened to have the right temperature, the right humidity, and it happened to be far enough back that we didn't have wild animals or insects getting to these. So it was kind of a fluke. Mississippian, I had some things you used in Mississippian. Excellent. But it was just kind of a fluke that these managed to survive. But they found them, the brothers found them, they brought them out. They actually had some people come out and take a look at them and test them because they weren't really sure what they had, how old it was, things like that. So, and that's kind of how the museum got involved, at least, and aware that these existed. So once they tested them and everything, we asked the brothers, we were like, hey, we would love to have those as part of our collection. We'll preserve them and we could use them to really show, the people of Tennessee what life used to be like. The brothers had a little bit of a disagreement. One of the brothers thought that they should be donated to the museum. The other brother wanted to keep them. So we have one moccasin. They actually found a pair. The other one exists at one of the brothers' houses, and they have it out and they keep it there. Ideally, at some point, we're going to be able to kind of recombine that pair. But as of right now, they kind of split the baby. We got one, they got one. But since you mentioned blow darts, we actually do have one of those on display as well. This is a Choctaw blowgun and dart. Now this is a modern make. This is actually made by Choctaw, the Choctaw now. This is not old, but it's used. They made it using traditional methods. So you got the dart to the side and the blow dart gun, so to speak, right there. Now, just to jump back into our narrative here, the woodland period, basically what happens is because they are stationary, because they are starting towns, their tribes are able to grow. They no longer have to move. They no longer have, at least constantly, they have for the first time, and this is huge, and it's, it doesn't really hit students because most of us don't have to worry about starvation, but this is the first time in the woodland period that there was a predictable amount of food. You can plant crops, and provided there's no natural disaster, you know how much food you're going to have. So and if your tribe gets bigger, you plant more crops. If your group grows, you can grow the food with it. So that's going to allow people to start doing things that are not necessarily just farming or hunting. It's going to allow people to kind of get into other aspects and do other jobs. Agriculture is a bit of a risk. You're absolutely right. So what happens is, because of that specialization that starts to happen, that really is what kind of moves us into the Mississippian period here. So Mississippians are not doing anything wildly different than the woodland period, but what they are doing is they're doing it a lot better. As people get really good at doing things, they are able to really improve and grow the way they do it. Mississippian villages could have as many as a couple of thousand people in them. These are cities. I mean, they truly are. You can see the structures have gotten a lot more complex in the image here. Clay mud walls, high thatched roofs. These are also going to have a lot of those big mounds. If you guys have heard of mound builders, those are start in the woodland period, and they start as burial mounds. And that's another thing we really see from the woodland period. We start to see a lot more elaborate ceremonies, burial ceremonies, burial practices, like by building mounds, burial mounds, because again, they're in one place. Your dead are going to be there. You can mourn them, you can visit, but also since you're in one place, you can develop ceremonies that take some time. Mississippians, they're going to take they're going to take mound building, and they're going to move it out of just being a burial practice, and they're going to build mounds for specific sites around the village, around the town that they've built up, whether it's a communal structure, whether it's a ceremonial or a religious center, whether it's someone who's in charge and leading the tribe. They're going to have these mounds built throughout. But kind of talking about how good people are getting at things, we have some Mississippian art that is made here. Pottery, which really goes all the way back to the Archaic period, but it's going to get a lot more elaborate. This is a duck bowl, and it does look like a duck. That's how good they were. Even today, we can still see what it is. This is effigy pottery. It's made to look like something. This is not something that was designed just to hold. It actually does have a decorative or ceremonial importance. We'll see pottery that from here, this doesn't match really any animal exactly, at least. So this is probably something from a tradition or a religious ceremony or a story. Ceremonial objects, including our gorget, spider gorget, representing a Native American tale or Native American lore, and even stone statues, which this one's pretty good. But honestly, this is the better one that we have as far as detail goes. This is an ancestor statue. This is actually the female. You'd have two of these, female and male, in a village, and these represent the ancestors. They're going to be used for their ceremonial practices. And you can see the level of detail, even though this is over 600 years old at this point. The detail in the face. And this is made out of sandstone, which is a very soft stone. It tends to weather more, and it's still in this good condition. So by allowing people to specialize, what you're going to get is a lot more elaborate, a much more elaborate society. Cities are getting bigger. More people are living there. There's more jobs to do. Ceremonies are going to get more elaborate. People are just going to get better, basically doing everything. So this is what you're going to see throughout the Mississippian periods. And you can see again, representation of one of the ceremonies that may have happened there as well. And then another object I always like to show off while we're here. This is one of the biggest ones in the museum. This is our dugout canoe. And this is really how they would have worked with wood. They also would have made wood kind of fences and gates around various parts of the community. But they're going to do this with fire. Since they don't really have access to a lot of metal tools, they're using mostly stone tools. That doesn't work very well against hard wood, so they're going to use fire to help work with the wood. They'll light a fire at the bottom of the base of a tree, scoop away the ash, and weaken it basically until they can knock it over. And then being a dugout canoe, that's how they make it. They dig it out. They actually start a fire across the top of the tree as it's laying down, let it burn, put the fire out, scoop out the ash. Do another row and keep going basically until you have a canoe shape. And then you can use stone tools to shape it up. This one, I don't know if my Bluetooth headset will actually connect, but I'll just show you about how long it is by walking to the other end of it. So you guys can see, if I didn't get out of range of my Bluetooth, you guys can see this is about 30 feet long. So these are very large. Now, the other thing I will say about this, one thing that a lot of people notice are those waves that you see across the back there. That is not a design feature of the canoe itself. That's not supposed to be there. This canoe was actually found by a farmer. It had been buried in some mud and just came uncovered on his property. And he goes out one day, he sees it. And as a farmer, he takes one look at this thing and he says, you know what, that would make a great, that would be great for? Actually, I'm going to let you guys tell me, what do you think this canoe, other than being a canoe, feeding trough? Absolutely right. So that's what he does. He drags it up, puts it up beside the barn, and he throws food in it for the animals. And those waves are where the animals would lean over and they would rub against it as they ate. So it eventually wore it away and put those waves in there. It was actually his kids that donated this to the museum. So, and Kara, cut me off if we run out of time here. But as we look through these 4 periods, we can see the development of this culture as it goes through and how it changes with time, how they develop new technologies and adapt to their culture. And this is basically the same kind of progression that cultures make all across the world. So before I kind of get into anything else, I do want to have enough time to make sure that you guys have can ask me questions. Are there any questions about anything we've talked about so far? Is the state artifact on display? Now, unfortunately, I know we are the Tennessee State Museum. We actually do not have the state artifact in our collection. I believe that's at East Tennessee. Is it at the McClung or East Tennessee Historical Society? Sandy? I forget whose collection that's actually in. I think the McClung. Okay, yeah, I think it's the McClung as well. So Sandy is an ancestor statue, very much like the one that I just showed you guys. It is officially the state's artifact. It's technically a little in better condition than ours. Not that I'm jealous about that or bitter or anything, but no, that's in the McClung's collection. So and I believe it's on display there. Excuse me. Let's see, for the people who are nomadic, how far do they typically travel? Honestly, I am not sure. I've gotten that question and I've never found a solid answer of what the average travel would be. So I'm not 100% sure. I really do think it would depend on how far you need to go. 15, 20 miles in a day is perfectly walkable, things like that. But it kind of depends on, I think, the resources you find and things like that. You guys keep putting questions in the chat, but I'm going to show you this map that we have here in the museum as well. And it has sites from each of the periods, light green for Paleo, orange for Archaic, blue for Woodland, and kind of a greenish for Mississippian cultures. But each of those dots is basically a southeastern Indian tribal area or a settlement area, or basically a site. These are not by any means all of them across the state. This is really just a selection. But you can see a lot of them do follow the rivers. You definitely want a water source. So as you travel, you're definitely going to want to stick to those. But they're all across the state. East, Middle, and West Tennessee all become places that Native Americans are going to settle throughout all 4 of these periods. Excuse me, my throat's dried out on me today. In Middle Tennessee, you're going to end up with places like Mound Bottom and Robertson County, Coates Hines, not too far from where I am here in Nashville. You're going to end up with several places in East Tennessee, Chota, Toqua, Tanasi, and places like that that are going to move into the historic period. Again, keep throwing questions out into the chat, but basically, these Native American groups spend really thousands of years in Tennessee as kind of the only groups that are here. And it is going to be, eventually, other people come in. European explorers start to show up, start coming into the area. Does anybody know the first European explorer to come into the area that eventually will be Tennessee? De Soto, absolutely right. The Spanish are going to come in first. He's going to be traveling up and down some of the rivers and basically end up in Tennessee. That's a picture there. And this is going to be the first contact some of these groups have. Now, the Mississippian period, something happens. We're not 100% sure. People are still studying. There are theories out there. But basically, these big, large cities that I was talking about, they kind of disappear. Or break down into smaller areas. Probably disease has a lot to do with it as it spreads across the continent from the earliest European explorers. But there are some other things that could have caused that, whether it's basically what we would consider today economic issues, or the tribes maybe the cities just got too big to be able to self-support. So basically a lot of these break up into smaller and more remote tribes instead of the cities. And that's really what the Europeans that make it into Tennessee are going to run into. So the tribes that we are aware of, the ones that we have the names for and we know what they called themselves, or at least what Europeans called them, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Creek, the Shawnee, those are the ones the Europeans are going to run into. They are not exactly Mississippian. That's not the same. So the Mississippian period kind of ends, and we end up with these tribal groups that we're more familiar with, probably. But that's who the Europeans are going to run into. And these early European contacts are not always going to be positive. De Soto runs into the Chickasaw and creates basically conflict almost immediately. He does try to kidnap several members of the tribe. He attacks one of the cities. And tries to kidnap them and then basically enslave them for the rest of his trip. And the Chickasaw fight back, and they overpower his group. They're outnumbered. De Soto's men are outnumbered, and they were able to push them off. And that's the first European contact the Chickasaw have, and it colors the way that they deal with Europeans from that point on. So the Chickasaw from that point are going to resist any kind of settlement by white settlers coming into that area from that point on. The Cherokee do have a different early contact. It's not always positive, but the Cherokee are going to actually end up running into French and British fur traders and long hunters, people that are coming in really in ones and twos, not in big military groups like De Soto came from. Those expeditions were really military expeditions with soldiers and everything. But fur traders from France and British long hunters from the colonies, they are coming in ones and twos, threes, maybe. They are coming in to explore, to make money, to find furs and skins and take them back in trade. So when they run into Native American groups, their first instinct is not going to be to attack. First of all, that's just a bad idea. You're over here by yourself. You're not going to be able to survive that. So they end up trading with them. So the Cherokee, especially being on the eastern part of Tennessee, their early experience is going to be very different. They're going to trade back and forth with the Europeans that are coming into the area. And eventually that's going to build a repeated relationship between the Cherokee and them. So as settlers, white settlers start to move in, That's where you kind of get these negotiations for signing treaties and selling land, is because there was already a pre-existing relationship with some of these tribes. Now, that doesn't, of course, a lot of the treaties are signed under duress or through trickery, but some of them are not. Some of them are actually signed treaties as well. Do we have a traveling trunk on this topic? Yes, we actually have two. We have one on prehistoric Native Americans. It is very archaeology based, and it deals with kind of what I talked about at the very beginning, how we're going to use these found objects to help us put together a picture of what culture was like, but it does talk about all four of them. And we also have a trunk on the, specifically on the Cherokee, the historic tribe, from contact up through the Indian Removal Act. So that wasn't me. So we have two different trunks depending on which kind of side of Native American history in Tennessee you want to look at. So we have both of those. If you want to get on our website, you can check those out and see which ones really fit with your standards a little bit more than the others. Any other questions for me so far? I think we got a couple of minutes left, so I can definitely take one. All right, so talking about the relationship with those early explorers coming in, as if you guys have any more questions, throw them on in there. One of the more famous long hunters is going to be Daniel Boone. We actually have some of his stuff. That gun in the middle supposedly belonged to Daniel Boone, as well as a bear trap, which you can't really see because it's black down here. And this is basically his, this right here, basically his purse, his satchel that he would have carried everything he needed in. But we have some of those trade goods that would have been from around the same time period. So one thing that was very useful to the native groups that are going to be in here is metal tools. Again, we talked about from the beginning why stone was so common. Metal was just hard to come by, but metal tools are going to be definitely something that they could trade with. And various, honestly, jewelry pieces. You know, there are stories of beads and things being traded, but jewelry pieces and fine art that was made at the time is actually going to be traded back and forth as well. And I will show you guys again, just because I'm showing off artifacts, since I'm up in the gallery, so I might as well make the most of it. This piece is a very interesting piece. It's a pictoglyph from possibly about 1000 CE. And it's hard to tell, and even, I mean, not just because you're on video, but it's hard to tell in person, but you can see images that are carved into this. And we don't have a ton of this kind of artwork on the eastern side of the country. You get a lot more of it in the western, southwestern areas. But we have some really interesting pictoglyph pieces. And I'm actually going to try and show you guys. We actually do have on the exhibit case here, we've highlighted the images that are in there. So I'm going to see if I can show that to you guys as well. So those are the images that are actually carved into it. Now, for the teachers, if you want to bring your students to the museum, we actually do this program. It's a slightly shortened version of it than what I did today. But we do this program to talk about the Native American prehistoric groups and periods. And then we also have one that talks about into the historic period as well. But unless you guys have any other questions for me, I am just going to say thank you guys very much for joining me. I know it's election day and people are busy trying to do some stuff, but thank you for giving me the time and coming in and checking out the museum.
Thank you, Chris. So just a couple of quick reminders as we close up for today. That was fascinating. So thank you again so much. Just a reminder again that we do have the information on the Padlet for today's session and for other sessions in this series. If you're interested in joining us for next month's session is Who Are These Tennessee Trailblazers? And that will be presented by the Tennessee State Library and Museum. You can go to the website listed here in order to register for that, to read the full description for next month's session, as well as the sessions for the coming months. We will be doing one of these each month through the month of March. And if you're interested in receiving PD credit for participating today or for viewing this recording, you can access that using this link right here. So you can just type in that URL and that will get you to our survey. We send those out about once a week. So complete that. And then, like I said, within about a week, you should have your survey emailed to you. If for some reason you don't get it, you can just email me and let me know, and I'll get that out to you. Also, we have a QR code if that's easier for you to access in order to get that survey. That will also take you to where you can fill out that survey for the PD credit. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next month.